We're going to learn now Gemara for Parashat Pikudei for Wednesday from Chok Yisrael. Amar Rav Huna, Bodkin limzonot ve'en bodkin lichsut. If a person comes to ask for support from charity funds, if he asks for food, Bodkin, you have to examine to make sure that he's really not a fraud, that he really deserves to be supported. Ve'en bodkin lichsut, but if a person comes to ask for clothing, that he needs clothing, that you don't have to check. Immediately you give him the clothes that he needs. If you want to say, you can say that we can base this on a pasuk. You can say this is common sense. If you want to say common sense, the person who doesn't have clothing, he's exposed to shame, and it will be shameful to stand not dressed. And therefore, that's why you need to provide him clothes immediately without even checking. But a person who's hungry is not as embarrassed as a person who's not clothed properly. If you want to say, it's a pasuk. The pasuk says, Alo paros laraib lahmecha beshin ktiv paresh ve'adar avle. In other words, the word paros, which has two meanings. One of them could be either to split, to share your bread with him, or parosh, to explain, to clarify, in other words, to examine. And therefore, when it comes to bread, you examine whether he deserves or not. And then you give him. But when it speaks about covering, when you see somebody who's naked, you cover him right away, you give him the clothes without even checking. Rav Yehuda disagrees with Rav Huna. Rav Yehuda says you examine when it has to do with clothing. Then, but you don't need to examine when it comes to a person being hungry for food. So here Rav Yehuda says that you give priority to the person who needs food. You can explain it either based on common sense or either based on a pasuk. Common sense, person who's hungry, he's in pain, he's distressed. Therefore, you have to give it to him because he's suffering. And the person who's not properly clothed is no suffering like a person who's hungry. For you want to say the pasuk says paros, which is the way that you read it, it means you share. So you share immediately your bread with somebody who's hungry. But there it has to do with clothing. It says ki tir'eh aron v'chisito k'sheira elecha. When you see somebody who's naked, meaning when you examine and really clarify that he really is in need, then you support him. Tanya kevated Rav Yehuda. We learn a baraita just like Rav Yehuda's opinion. The pasuk says, the baraita says, Amar kisuni botkim aharav parnesuni and botkim. This baraita says when a person says, I need clothing, you support him right away. But when he says, parnesuni, Paresuni and Botkim. Rebuda Amar Kasuni Botkim. So Rabbi says when he says clothing, you check that he really deserves to be clothed. Paresuni is hungry and needs food, and Botkim, we don't check. Amar Asi לעולם עלים לאדם עצמו משליש שקל בשנה, שנאמר והעמדנו עלינו מצוות לתת עלינו שלישית השקל בשנה לעבודת בית אלוקינו. So according to Rabbi Asi, a person should give at least a third of a shekel per year for tzedakah. Now it brings a pasuk from Nehemiah that speaks about a third of a shekel given for tzedakah. Ve'amar Rav Asi, shekula tzedakah keneged kol ha-mitzvot. According to Rav Asi, the mitzvah of charity is equal to all the mitzvot. Shne'emar ve'emadnu alnu mitzvot ve'gomer, mitzvah en ktiv ela mitzvot. The pasuk there says mitzvot when he spoke about the charity, giving tzedakah. So in other words, the mitzvah of tzedakah is equal to all the mitzvot. Amar Bil'azar gadol ha'ma'aseh yoter min ha'oseh. Rabbi Bil'azar says somebody who causes other to do a mitzvah, is even greater than the person who is the doer of the mitzvah. Shne'emar v'haya ma'aseh tzedakah shalom, v'avodat tzedakah ashket v'aveta ad olam. So in other words, he brings a pasuk here that the work of righteousness shall be peace, and the effect of righteousness. What is the effect? In other words, the one who causes another to do the mitzvah. So in other words, person writes a check for charity, he has a big mitzvah. The one who brought him to write that check for charity has even a greater mitzvah. ועד עולם זכה, לא פרוס נא לעמך לא זכה, ועניים מרודים תביא בית. So, if a person is deserving, then he will share the bread with the hungry. And if he's not deserving, he shall bring the poor to his house for complaint to the house. In other words, what is ani merudim tavi bayit? He exposes himself to having that money which he should have given to charity to be given in other places to people who come to collect from him. Collect, and even like there is an explanation, it could be a collection of not by a poor man, but a person who comes to collect all sorts of things. Amma, here is an explanation, it says like a tax collector or that type of thing, because he didn't use the money for charity to give to the people that were deserving. That money could be wasted on things that he wouldn't have paid had he given the money to charity. Amar lehu Rava livnei Mechuzah. Rava told the people of the city of Mechuzah, "V'matuta minaychu usu ba'adei adadei ki eched eleverechu shelama b'malchuta." He begged them. He says, "Please, you should make sure to give tzedakah one another, so that you may be on good terms with the government. You have peace with the government." Amar Rabbi Elazar, bizman shebet hamikdash kayam, the time of Bet HaMikdash, according to Rabbi Elazar, when the Bet HaMikdash is there, Adam shokel shiklo mitkapel lo. A person gives him a hatzita shekel, right? And he has kapara. He has atonement for whatever sins. He has some protection. Akshav she'en Bet HaMikdash kayam. Now that we don't have Bet HaMikdash, im osim tzedakah mutar. If you give tzedakah, great. If a person doesn't give charity, if the Jewish people don't give charity to the needy, ba'im umot ha'olam v'notim bizroa, then the nations of the world can come and take the money from them by force, what they could have given willingly to charity. ונותנים bizroa ואף על פי כן נחשב להם לצדקה. And even though that would happen, that's considered to them a tzedakah. Like the pasuk says, "V'nuksayich tzedakah." What is nuksayich? Those who are your oppressors, those who collect maybe not roughly tzedakah, considered like tzedakah. This is the tzedakah you would have given. Amar Rav milta ishtaya li'ula meshagesh orhatei de'imeh b'shemei de Rabbi Elazar. My dichtiv Rabbi says this is a statement that was said by Ula meshagesh orhatei de'imeh in the name of Rabbi Elazar. What does this mean? That he wears charity like armor. To tell you, my shirion ze kol klipa uklipa mitzaref lishirion gadol. Just like in an armor, every scale of the armor joins together to form the complete protection for the person. Tzedakah, so by comparison, charity kol pruta upruta. Every coin that you give, every small amount of money that you give for charity, mitztarefet lecheshbon gadol, joins together with another coin that you gave, another small amount that you gave, and together they form a shirion, an armor of protection for the person. So great is the mitzvah of tzedakah. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.